Eating recovery, how a starving brain may create cravings and relapse, and what to do about it, especially the what to do about it. So, we've all been taught that addiction is like a three legged stool, that it has three primary drivers: biochemical, having mostly to do with the brain, but also we can include other parts of the body as well. Psychosocial, this can include trauma and isolation and shame, lots of things included under the psychosocial elements, and spiritual. And again, people approach spirituality from many, many different angles. But in general, I think of the spiritual leg of the stool having to do with the ability to accept and give love and forgiveness and acceptance, the ability to trust that good things can come your way, and meaning and purpose in life. Traditional treatment does an amazing job, when it does an amazing job, on the psychosocial and the spiritual legs of the stool. The 12-step program, is specifically known as a spiritual program and does a wonderful job also with socializing people, building sober support networks, and doing a lot of, through working the steps, a lot of internal healing. However, the thing that most programs miss is the brain. Other than giving us the option of medication, to deal with symptoms such as depression, anxiety, cravings, etc., the brain is ignored. And I believe that this is akin to trying to sit on a three-legged stool with only one leg. Maybe you can balance for a while, and then you topple over. And once you bring that third leg in, your recovery journey is on very solid ground. So we know that all three need to be addressed at more or less the same time, but the brain is the driver of all addictive processes, and therefore it's also the driver of recovery. So if our brains are online and functioning well, we engage in recovery more effectively. An imbalanced life requires an imbalanced brain. And whether you are in recovery from a substance use disorder, a compulsive behavior, a mental health issue, or simply trying to live the best life possible, your brain is your best friend. See, it's time to bring the brain into the conversation. It has very many functions, but it mediates all of our perceptions of the world around us, our interpretations of all of our senses, as well as what we feel and perceive. It mediates all of our mood and our behavior. It's our master control panel. And so a well balanced brain is what allows us to have energy and motivation to do good things in our life. It allows us to learn skills, to access willpower and have choice. It balances mood and allows us to cope with stress gracefully, and it mediates our beliefs and our perceptions. It also allows us to relax into sleep. So when the brain is well fed and in balance, our feelings and perceptions or interpretations of the world around us are more likely to be accurate. But when the brain is starving and out of balance, our feelings, moods, and interpretations can simply be all over the place. Two examples of this that most of us are very familiar with is the notion of hangry. When our blood sugar drops too low, lots of us get irritable and mean and reactive. We'll talk about why that is in a minute. But let's also think about PMS. The time, the 7 to 10 days before bleeding starts in menstruating women is actually an extremely high risk time of maladaptive behaviors and relapse back into addictive substances, also a lot of mental health, imbalances. And I know that when I used to have PMS, I would make mountains out of molehills and would get very upset about things. And then a week or so later, I would look back and I'd be embarrassed. It's like, oh, really? I reacted about that? Right? But this is because my brain was a bit out of balance because my hormones were out of balance. And so I was not perceiving and interpreting things accurately. So when in balance and well fed, the brain can allow us to make good choices. But when out of balance, bad choices or inability to choose our compulsive behavior can more easily occur. And we know that what we think and believe, whether accurate or not, affects what we feel. What we feel can lead to urges. Urges can lead to behaviors, and behaviors can have useful or unuseful consequences, constructive or destructive consequences. And so it's very important that we keep our brain in balance so that everything downstream is also in balance. But having an imbalanced brain is particularly important in the recovery process because it allows us to both learn and then remember to use our recovery skills. So, what are some of these skills? Pausing, thinking the drink through, calling a sponsor or friend if you have a craving, going to a meeting, praying, eating, especially eating protein, distracting yourself, journaling, etc. We have lots of recovery skills that we learn in meetings, that we learn in treatment programs, that we learn in therapy. But we have to have a functioning brain, first of all, to learn them, and secondly, to remember to use them in the moment when we really need to. Kind of like when the rubber meets the road. And so I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience, either in your own recovery journey or working with people, where somebody finds themselves like in the parking lot of the liquor store or calling up their dealer or, full blown using episode. And you ask them, well, how come you didn't use any of these recovery skills? Because I know you have them. How come you didn't call me, for instance? And they look at you blankly and say, I don't know. I guess I forgot. And early, early in my journey as a therapist, I would think, you forgot? Really? And now I understand it. And in a little while, you'll understand it as well. So the brain does all of these wonderful things through families of chemicals called neurotransmitters. And there's four families that are particular mood mediators. And these are serotonin, GABA, the endorphins, and the catecholamines. Somebody could please mute yourself. That would be great. There you go. So GABA and serotonin, which turns into melatonin, helps us be calm and relaxed and puts us to sleep. Serotonin also gives us a sense of humor. It helps us feel good about ourselves, allows us to forgive and let go of grudges, and allows us to trust God rather than worry so much. So even our spiritual life does better when our brains are in balance. Catecholamines, which include dopamine and norepinephrine and adrenaline. They wake us up. They give us energy, get up and go, motivation and drive. They also give us a sense of like satisfaction and reward when we complete a well done job. And then the endorphins relieve pain. They can create numbness when needed, like after a severe injury or a huge loss. They reduce loneliness and grief, support attachment and bonding. Now, all of these functions require enough brain chemicals called neurotransmitters that are made from the protein we eat. And when our neurotransmitters are depleted, we end up with symptoms in all of these categories. So, it's our brain's job to allow us to cope with stress gracefully. So, think about that for a moment. About the last time you encountered a stressful situation where you were able to problem solve and stay grounded and deal with it gracefully, versus the last time where that didn't happen so well, right? And maybe you weren't grounded or you didn't respond gracefully or you weren't able to problem solve in an effective manner, at least not at first. And think about the difference between the two. Very, very often, it's whether or not you fed your brain effectively that day. Because if it's our brain's job to allow us to cope with stress gracefully, it must be fed optimally to step up and allow us to step up. So it turns out that food,
Who
brain
peed on the floor?
in particular, is not optional at all. And so the brain requires certain nutrients to function, right? It requires adequate protein to provide the amino acid precursors of neurotransmitters. But for these amino acids to turn into neurotransmitters in the brain and in the body, it also requires specific vitamins and minerals to act as enzymes and cofactors. And we're supposed to be getting these specific vitamins and minerals from the food we eat. These are called essential nutrients. And an essential nutrient is something that if we don't get any at all, we die. If we don't get enough, something breaks, and we can only get it from food. This is what makes the right food so absolutely crucial. So we also need essential fatty acids. We need the good fats. These include some cholesterol, the omega-3 fatty acids, phospholipids from some seeds. We have to be careful with seed oils, but lecithin from sunflowers, from beans, from egg yolks are all crucial. In fact, it's crucial to the point that they've done research with people who've committed suicide. And it turns out that many, many of these people had either very, very low cholesterol in their brains or very low omega-3 fatty acids. The brain, each cell has to be coated by these crucial nutrients. And if we're not getting enough in our diet, or if we've been on a statin drug for a long time and our cholesterol has tanked, our cardiologist may be happy, but we're at very high risk for very serious depression. And then water. Water makes everything run. And we need enough exercise and we need enough sleep. So, how much protein are we talking about? Well, for most adults, women need a minimum of 40 to 60 grams per day. Men need a minimum of 60 to 80 grams a day. And many people need much, much, much more than this. But in my work with the chronic relapser, person who just went round and round and round, treatment programs and AA meetings, and it just couldn't make it work for them, most of these people are barely getting 10 grams of protein a day. And once I get them eating 20 grams of protein every 4 hours, all of a sudden they feel balanced, they feel grounded, their mood becomes stable, and they stop relapsing. Blood type does seem to matter. A and B blood types can get away with more plant-based protein, less animal protein. O's need a lot of animal protein typically. Vegan sources are okay. It's just much harder to get enough. And then you need to be supplementing with things like biotin and carnitine and maybe cholesterol and your vitamin B12. So what are some of these healthy protein sources? You see many of them in this picture. Eggs and garbanzo beans and cheese and, salmon and beef here are all excellent sources of protein. So a portion of meat or fish the size of your palm is approximately 3 ounces or 20 grams of protein. 3 eggs will give us 21 grams of protein, so a nice 3-egg omelet for breakfast. Milk and milk products such as yogurt and cheese. So just a simple 8-ounce glass of milk is 8 grams of protein. So if you condense that into cheese or yogurt or cottage cheese, right, 8 ounces of Greek yogurt is typically 23 grams. Half a cup of cottage cheese is typically like 20 grams, and you just move from there. Now, of course, not everybody can tolerate milk products, but if you can, very, very valuable. And then our vegan sources, which include nuts and nut butters, seeds and beans, limited soy products. We don't want to have too much, but it's a good source of protein. Some of your grains like quinoa or even, one of the weeds, purslane, has high protein in it and high omega-3 fatty acid status. Moving on, why eat fruits and veggies? Well, in general, they provide crucial mineral and vitamin cofactors to make more neurotransmitters. The colorful phytonutrients, the little chemicals, molecules in some of these plants and the fruits that give it color, green, orange, yellow, red, protect our eyes, they're antioxidant, they protect against cancer, they do all sorts of wonderful things. Vegetables and some fruit also provides fiber, which feed the good bacteria. Good bacteria does all sorts of things in our body, but they also support a healthy mood. And there's more and more and more research about how the right bacteria can reduce anxiety and depression, but having too many of other strains of bacteria actually set us up for relapse. And the fiber removes toxins from the body. And if we have heavy toxic load in our body, we feel miserable and we can be depressed and we can be anxious and we can just feel yucky. And we're much more likely to want to reach for a mood altering substance when we feel yucky. So we want to keep those toxins moving out. And the brain simply cannot function without vitamins and minerals. The FDA suggests 6 to 9 servings a day. We want typically less fruit than vegetables because, too much sugar is not very useful. Now, a serving is actually not very much. It's half a cup of, fruits and veggies, or it's a whole cup of leafy greens. We're not talking about a ton of food. It is better to go organic when you can, because we do want it to be more nutrient dense. And unfortunately, in the food supply, according to the FDA, the nutrients in the same fruits and vegetables that we eat today compared to what our great grandparents ate is significantly less nutrient dense. So we actually have to eat more. And then we want good fats. We want to be increasing the sources of omega-3 fatty acids, such as egg yolks, wild game, walnuts, your cold water fishes like salmon and sardines. Somebody recently told me that you can buy actual cod livers. Now, I like this sort of thing. So I just bought myself on Amazon a case of cod livers. And apparently they're not very fishy. So I'll let you know. Then you want to decrease vegetable oils such as peanut, soy, canola. All of those seed oils are now being shown to actually be really, really inflammatory. And I've been seeing some studies showing up that are indicating that one of the reasons for the increased colon cancer incidences in young people might be due to their overexposure to these fatty acids. I'm sorry, to these seed oils. Karen, yes, look up Dr. Michael Lewis and his book, When Brains Collide. I also just interviewed him for our brand new podcast. And so his interview will be released either this coming Wednesday or the following Wednesday. So there's lots of information in that lecture. And he will be speaking at our conference in May. So good question. Now, some saturated fat like butter or coconut oil is good, but we want to avoid trans fats or margarine made out of hydrogenated oil. Olive oil is great. So let's circle back around to talk about amino acids. What are they? Well, they are molecules which form the building block of the human body. Essential aminos are found in food and clump together to form protein. When this protein is digested, it is broken back down into its component amino acids. So we have to have adequate digestion. These amino acids are then absorbed into the bloodstream and go everywhere in the body. They make our skin, they make our muscle, they make our blood cells, they make our enzymes, they even make our DNA. So they do lots and lots of things. We need enough because specific ones, what's left over basically, cross the blood-brain barrier and create neurotransmitters in the presence of specific vitamins and minerals. Now, we can also get these amino acids over the counter and from Amazon in little capsules. For instance, I have a bottle of, L-tyrosine right here. And tyrosine actually turns directly into dopamine. It's not very clear, but there we go. And research shows that when you take these amino acids, like that tyrosine, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and creates new neurotransmitters in as little as 1 to 20 minutes, depending upon delivery methods. So if I were to open one of those tyrosine capsules, mix in a little bit of water, put it under my tongue, swish it around, hold it, it's going to start absorbing and going straight to my brain within a minute or two, creating new dopamine, thus raising my mood and raising my energy. And with enough of it, turning off cravings for things like meth and cocaine and coffee. So they are amazing tools. And let's go back for a moment here. And my entire level 1 training in my school, the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition, is designed to make you an expert at amino acid therapy at the end of the 10-month training program. So do you remember HALT? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired? Well, this acronym was kind of discovered or developed in the late 1940s at an addiction hospital in London. Not much was understood about addiction way back in the 40s, but they did identify that these 4 situations put people at very high risk for cravings and relapse. And it's interesting, and we'll look at in a minute, that hunger actually sets us up to be angry and to be tired, possibly even more likely to be lonely. Unfortunately, people jumped on the hungry bandwagon with sugar because it's like, oh, blood sugar goes low, we're hungry, let's grab sugar and make the cravings go away. To the point that candy bars are actually even mentioned in the big book. This, I think, is a tragedy, and it comes from a scientific misunderstanding of why and how hunger actually leads to relapse, because it turns out that sugar is also an addictive drug. And many people who use sugar to deal with cravings in early recovery have ended up struggling with sugar for decades after they stopped using alcohol or cocaine and it is really sad. Many treatment programs actually promote sugar and allow it, and certainly don't teach about the dangers of it. So, have you switched addictions? Okay. Many recovering people switch addiction to sugar because the neurotransmitters are still depleted and they have starving brains. And a lot of treatment programs are not feeding people well. We know that AA meetings are not known for their high protein snacks. This commonly leads to mood swings, reactive behaviors, lack of serenity, fatigue, cravings, and relapse. So, what's the solution to this? The solution is to eat protein every 4 hours and use specific amino acids such as glutamine, which can feed the prefrontal cortex if blood sugar drops. And then 5-HTP, tyrosine, or dephenylalanine to rebuild specific neurotransmitter systems. Because it turns out that sugar, like alcohol, THC, and nicotine, fire all 4 neurotransmitter systems as needed across the board. Okay, your smoke first thing in the morning it's for the purpose of firing dopamine and norepinephrine and helping you wake up and function. Whereas the cigarette before bed has the opposite function to help you wind down and relax, firing GABA and serotonin and then melatonin. Very versatile. Well, sugar is as versatile. And Julia Ross, one of my colleagues, actually wrote a book called The Craving Cure that helps you identify what your particular sugar craving is due to. And by extension, what you're craving for any addictive substance or behavior is due to. And again, we teach this in the level 1 training. So reactive hypoglycemia is a huge issue in early recovery and later on recovery. Seems to be the primary relapse trigger for all addiction. It's rampant in the American population, causes many of the symptoms in our clients, is a major cause of PMS, but up to 95% of people with substance use disorder in early recovery, when they're tested, have medically diagnosed reactive hypoglycemia. So if you look at this chart, this is 5-hour glucose tolerance test. I think there were 300 people in this study. So a study was actually done in 1966, but it's been replicated many times. Everybody was fasted overnight, given the same amount of sugar drink, nasty sugar drink, first thing in the morning. And blood was taken upon the beginning of the test and then every 30 minutes for 5 hours. So you can see that at the beginning, there's a cluster of people who had kind of normal fasting blood sugar levels. The purple line is just a completely different story. The red line is diabetes, type 2 diabetes, where you start high, you take sugar, you go high, and you stay high. The middle line, the green line, is normal glucose metabolism, where your body, you've not worn out your ability to metabolize sugar. And so your body can still do it. It's got some insulin running around, and you have the sugar. The insulin immediately starts working on getting the sugar into the cells where it belongs. And sugar doesn't get too high, gradually decreases, goes back to normal, and insulin levels go back to normal. The green line is the reactive hypoglycemia that when we test them, 95%, which is essentially everybody in early recovery has, we still haven't answered the question why. There's not been enough money put into studying this to really understand that, but we see it over and over and over again in clinical settings where people's blood sugar is tested. And now that we can use the technology of continuous glucose monitors, some of this may even become more clear. Anyway, when these people are exposed to sugar, their blood sugar leaps up to diabetic levels. It's actually called pre-diabetes. And the brain says, oh my goodness, blood sugar way too high, do something. So finally, the sluggish pancreas jumps into action and releases too much insulin. And you see now blood sugar plummets to dangerously low. 50 is dangerously low blood sugar. And the brain says, oh no, blood sugar way too low, do something. And now adrenaline kicks in. Now, adrenaline is not supposed to be part of the picture, but when blood sugar drops too low, adrenaline becomes part of the picture and is released because it can release stored sugar, glycogen, back into the bloodstream. So you see this green line, it goes back up again by the 3-hour mark. Well, these people did not cheat. They did not sneak in a little snacky, right? This is what the body did all by itself to raise blood sugar back up to safe levels. But adrenaline brings with itself a whole series of complications that we'll look at in a minute. So, reactive hypoglycemia, either if you've gone way too long without food, skipping a couple meals, or eating a high carbohydrate meal or challenge, you get very low blood sugar levels, adrenaline release, and symptoms and cravings. So what are some of these symptoms of hypoglycemia? Well, first, we have the symptoms of very low blood sugar. Our brain actually needs supply of energy. Most of us use glucose as a supply. So when blood glucose levels drop very low, the brain doesn't function very well. So it can lead to depression all the way to suicide, fatigue, confusion, all the way to psychosis. And then adrenaline kicks in. Adrenaline can make us irritable and reactive, aggressive, all the way to full-blown violence. Adrenaline can keep us from falling asleep or wake us up suddenly in the middle of the night and we cannot get back to sleep. Adrenaline can give us anxiety all the way to panic, and it gives us the desire to drink or use. Now, you notice I have two columns here. This is because we believe that this hypoglycemia is also the result of what we the cause of what we now know and call post-acute withdrawal, and we used to just call it dry drunk, right? But also PMS. These symptoms are identical, and we believe it's because blood sugar becomes very dysregulated in early recovery and premenstrually. So adrenaline here is the bad guy. First of all, it destabilizes us. You know how you feel on adrenaline, right? We can feel anxious, agitated, impulsive, teary, shaky, angry. But when our brains have been sensitized to using an addictive substance or behavior, there is an unconscious conditioned response to reach for this substance of choice, although there's not a whole lot of choice at that point in time, um, when we feel destabilized. It could be excited and happy, it could be angry or anxious. Whatever it is, when the brain is out of homeostasis, we get this conditioned response to have a craving for a drug or behavior of choice. Okay, well, you can use your recovery skills, right? Except that adrenaline shuts down the part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where we access our recovery skills. So this is where and why we forget to pray, call our sponsor, go to a meeting. We forget to care about our promises, think about consequences, or protect ourselves. It's like all of our recovery skills are on vacation somewhere, and we don't have access to them. And we lose willpower. So we are destabilized. We have an automatic craving. We do not have access to our recovery skills, and we don't have willpower. This is one of the biggest reasons we believe for relapse. So again, low blood sugar levels or a precipitous drop leads to a starving brain, inability to access or use recovery skills, and picking up again, or feeling miserable. So what do we do about it? Eat protein and complex carbohydrates every 3 to 4 hours to reduce cravings and feel more stable. You can also take the amino acid L-glutamine to feed the PFC until you can bring food in. You want to include fiber and healthy fats to slow down the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream. So never have sugar by itself. Always make sure you have it with other real food to moderate things. Avoid simple sugar and starches. Premenstrual women tend to be have more reactive blood sugar, need to be eating every 3 hours, as opposed to every 4 hours. And as I mentioned before, PMS is a very high risk time for recurrent use in women. Now I've got a couple of pages of different ideas here, which we can come back around to. But it's also available on the website. We've got all of this information on the Eating Protein Saves Lives website. The clinical approach for you clinicians is to limit access to sugar to your clients. It's just not useful. Provide education and more education and more education around these concepts. Offer cooking and shopping classes. So many people in early recovery do not know how to cook, do not know how to shop. It scares them. They weren't raised to know, with healthy eating. They weren't raised knowing how to cook and shop. And so they may feel better in treatment because they're being fed well, if they're being fed well. But then they go back out on their own. They default to their old methods of feeding themselves and start feeling crappy again and don't know why. We want to use a 1 to 3 day food mood diary with each client to help them connect the dots and identify if this is going on. At each individual session or group, ask about healthy eating because we all need frequent reinforcement. And we need to problem solve the compliance issues. Sometimes getting 20 grams of protein in every 4 hours is really hard to do. We have lots of ideas on our website, and you can really brainstorm with your clients about how to make it happen. And then each time a client reports a craving or a slip or relapse, recurrent use, ask them, when was the last time you ate protein prior to your slip, prior to your craving, prior to your domestic violence incident or your child abuse incident? Right? This has lots of implications that goes far beyond addiction. I've been asking this question now for 25 years, and I was blown away by how consistently people would say, 10 hours ago, yesterday, or what's protein? I had an apple. Does that contain protein? Okay, so we need to be asking this question and we need to be educating our clients. These are some useful questions in groups and individual counseling, or to be even asking yourself in journaling. What was your relationship to food and feeding yourself when you were using? What about now? Do you think that some of your craving and slips might be related to missing one or more meals? What are your favorite sources of protein? What are your favorite fruits and veggies? Did you learn how to shop and cook as you were growing up? What about now? And what is your relationship now to sugar? These are all crucial, crucial questions. Finally, in session, feed your clients. I started 25 years ago feeding my clients in session. If somebody came in labile, bouncing off the walls, could not settle down and engage in the therapy session, I'd ask, hey, when was the last time you had protein? And if it had been more than 3 or 4 hours, I would feed them nuts, yogurt, mozzarella cheese stick, full-blown meal, whatever they needed. And I'd have people rate their symptoms. Okay. How anxious, agitated, angry, whatever are you right now on a scale of 0 to 10? It'd be like 8 or 9. 15 minutes later, I'd ask them again. And the numbers are like cut in half. And you only have to do this a couple of times before your clients come in before the next session, all excited and say, you'll be so proud of me. I ate before coming into session, real food. So a well-fed brain leads to a happy brain, leads to a person who can make good use of treatment and recovery skills, leads to a more solid, stable recovery and life. So when was the last time you ate protein?